Did you know that over past 3 years, Graviky Labs pilot projects have prevented 6.5 million kilometers of avoided driving emissions and 700 tons of carbon? Namaste people, welcome to the show Get Set Green Season 2. I'm your host Pooja Arvi. In this podcast, we talk about sustainability, and this show is dedicated to change makers who are working to improve the environment through tackling climate change, recycling, upcycling and innovation. In this episode, we have Nikhil Kaushik, director and co-founder of Graviky Labs. He is a former CA turned entrepreneur who always enjoys taking on new challenges in his life. So, welcome to the show, Nikhil.
It's my pleasure, Pooja.
Thanks a lot for being here. And also, to the listener who is listening, did you know that over the past 3 years, Graviky Labs pilot projects have prevented nearly 6.5 million kilometers of avoided driving emissions and also 700 tons of carbon, which could have been ended up in the atmosphere. So, by the name Graviky, what it does mean to you? If you think it's related to gravity, then absolutely you are not right. Okay, so then if you're thinking what it might be, then that might be an interesting question for us to ask. So let's see. So Nikhil, क्या आपके ग्रेविकी लैब में ग्रेविटी है?
Not at all.
Yeah, yeah.
No, it is a pun on gravity, but on that day where we were registering the company, the most important thing was that the domain name that we wanted was available. So that is it. Nothing more, nothing less. No more. There is no depth to the name as such. The idea is to create depth to the work that we are doing.
The one who is listening to has clearly understood that it's not really about gravity. So now let's understand what's it all about. So Graviky is working towards, carbon sequestration. What they are trying to do is capture carbon from the atmosphere so that it can convert into jet fuels or even inks, which can go into beautiful art. So this technology is created by them and they are using and utilizing it. So I would also like to mention few awards taken by them are like they have earned the Edison Awards, Times Best Inventions for in 2019, and they also come under Forbes Under 30 list and many more. So yeah, this was overall an introduction to understand Graviky Labs as such. So now let's get started. So Nikhil, tell us what is Graviky Labs?
So as the name suggests, the labs was the most important thing for us. And we started in Indranagar, I think where you're based.
Bengaluru, yeah, people from Bengaluru, like listen, this is where the startups is coming from.
So that's where we started. And idea was to explore and do different things. And among all the things that we were doing, one of the idea was that you can create upcycling streams from carbon emissions. So instead of looking them as a pollutant, look at them as something that you can put to use. Just how we do with paper, just how we do with plastic. Either you can let them be, or you can do something about with them which could be useful for people. So that was the idea of when it comes to our interaction with air pollution was. But as such, we started with doing random experiments on many other things. But slowly over a period of time, other experiments took a back seat, and we more or less became a carbon upcycling company.
Since we are talking about upcycling and carbon sequestration, if the listener doesn't understand these words, I would like to explain those. First part, carbon sequestration, what does it mean? It means that capturing of atmospheric carbon dioxide into a liquid or solid form, like when it's there in like air as a pollutant, because when it goes beyond the limited, quantity, so that's how it has been converted and stored. That whole process is called as carbon sequestration, and there are various types. Usually that is done by vegetation, which is called as biological or natural way, or also you can say it as passive way of carbon sequestration. And in the second part of it, upcycling is a term where which it means is that when you are converting any product which could have been ended up as a waste, or which could have ended up once it has completed its intended use, it can be taken into other form of, where it can be used for other certain requirements or needs as such. So that means upcycling. So yeah, coming back to the agenda, we were talking that, like how it started from Indira Nagar. So Nikhil, can you tell us like how the, the journey was for you when you started out this from Bangalore with your labs, where you had an idea, in your mind that you wanted to make something which is a pollutant so that you can, solve this or address this problem. How did that journey go on?
Well, I think journey is still on, and I think we have done a bit of it. I should say, in the overall scheme of climate change, which is a much larger problem, I think we are contributing a small, maybe a very small drop to it, and that is how we see, climate change being addressed. It is not going to be addressed by a very big solution on its own. It will be thousands and millions of solutions contributing to the overall, overall fight against climate change and global warming. Now, for us, the journey was interesting and a lot of learnings that came our way, because none of our team members were coming from chemistry background or mechanical engineer background. I'm a chartered accountant. I come from purely finance background. And my interaction prior to starting Graviky in terms of Bangalore was primarily coming for debt syndication and restructuring deals. So it was a great shift for me personally, and also for a lot of my team members who are doing something very different, and then came about building something which is primarily dominated by a lot of chemists and electrochemists and other engineers. But we believe it gave us a sort of an advantage, because we were not looking at things how they are just done as of that date. We were free from, we were not encumbered by the conventional knowledge or anything. We were free to do whatever we felt like, and that gave us a lot of freedom to experiment and fail. But luckily, I should say, though, a lot of efforts were made by my team. A lot of those efforts were picked up by very interesting businesses across the world. So we got a lot of partners coming to us in very early in the day, and that allowed us to build the products right in the real world. So nothing was built in a lab as such, not an academic lab. Everything, all the R&D happened in real world, in commercial setups, purely to go to the market straight away. And that is what we do. We iterate fast. We take the product to the market and let the market decide whether it works or not. And in that process, we have built many things within the concept of air ink, the brand that we have, inks made from air pollution. A lot of things we have scrapped already, and a lot of things we are still building. And hopefully, the things that we're building now are going to leave a much larger impact on this fight versus what we have done till now.
It's like, splendid journey, and also how an idea or a thought of doing it like got converted into an actual product or technology per se. So that's such a, like satisfying journey, I would say, because like when you have something and you go on, do something about it, and it's actually, you can see the output in front of your eyes. I would say that's something to live for, or you enjoy that journey as well. So also, when can you please tell us more about this technology and how the carbon sequestration is done and how well it is converted into the product?
So I think before we get into that, it is important to understand what air pollution is.
Yes, yes, yeah.
One is the CO2 that we globally talk about. We always talk about, what is a carbon footprint. We talk about CO2 there. But when we talk about the health aspect, when we say, hey, WHO is saying so many people died because of air pollution in last year, or the deaths are linked to air pollution, those are happening not because of CO2. CO2 is not killing you yet. It may in future, but we are still very far away from that stage. What kills us are the things like air pollutants, like particulate matter. The particles that come out of when you're burning, fossil fuels. Come October, headlines, especially in northern India, just are about that, because the AQIs go above 300, 500 around Diwali and the crop burning season. It go even above 1,000, and that is the pollution that actually affects your, respiratory systems, and with all the other, diseases that come with it. Now, what we are doing is we didn't start with CO2. We are still doing some experiments around CO2, but we started with sequestration of PM 2.5 emissions. Now, We initially built our own technology to do that, but also we started working with industries who already had some sort of devices on their exhaust. It could be scrubbers, it could be filters, it could be, ESPs with electrostatic precipitators that are generally used for reducing the particulate emissions, going out in the air, and started collaborating with them to sequester the PM 2.5 emissions. Now, what happens is these emissions, if you just look at them purely from chemistry perspective, they are very carbon rich. So they have other impurities in them, but there is a significant carbon component in that. And what we are doing is we are taking that carbon, carbon part of those emissions and using that as a replacement for carbon black. Now, what happens is carbon black is made by burning fossil fuels too. You take petroleum, you burn it under a controlled environment, and companies like Philip Carbons or Cabot make that carbon black. And what we are doing is we are saying, okay, yes, sequestration is done, but you don't burn fossil fuels to make carbon black. For at least some use cases, you can use this, carbon soot to replace the carbon black. And in a way, what you're doing essentially is one part sequestration is happening. That means lesser emissions are in the air. On the other hand, if you replace the carbon black with these pigments, you reduce the dependence on fossil fuels. So this is the impact part of this whole journey, that you can actually just capture it and put it inside the ground also. That also does a good, does leave a good impact. But if you replace carbon black with it, you are reducing the carbon footprint of the things that are made by carbon black, which is, for example, inks, paints. We have not worked on tires, but also vehicular tires are, made from carbon black. That's the core source of making those tires. So this is what we are doing. Now, when we make those inks, what we are essentially doing is we are replacing the carbon black. The rest we don't touch yet. So we are not touching the binders or resins that might be going in the ink, but we are replacing the carbon black. That gives you a decent carbon footprint saving on your printing, footprint impact. So that is what essentially we are doing. Ink making process is purely industry based. It's not, we have seen a lot of our previous content that is out there in public somehow gives people a sense that you just put this device and ink will come out of it. That is how it is done. Can't help. That is how initial content was built. But we've been trying to get a lot of people to understand that ink is made in a factory, and it is made in how any conventional ink is made. Just that this ink has a much lesser carbon footprint
than also the conventional one. Yes,
conventional black ink.
Yeah. Adding to that point, I would like to say sometimes when you have any scientific innovation or invention, what also matters is how well you communicate, because there are a number of interpretations which can be made by your results. So it depends on how they take on and go on. What I understood from this is basically you are focusing on tackling the market which is using this carbon black for their production, instead of that using the whatever the carbon content can be taken from the industries which are already producing them. So that's one good way of, upcycling, I can say. Why? Because when you are upcycling any product, what I see, what I look into those products is that how efficient is that? Is it required, or how well addresses the conventional one? Because there should be some kind of difference or any advantage over that, then the whole process of upcycling will make much better sense, I say. So Nikhil, when you started out this, can you tell more about your team and how well you came up with this idea? Whose idea was it that you can make this? Because standing in my position, I'm thinking if I say oh, okay, so let's say if I can take carbon out of this and do it like this, that would be for me, I would say Wonder Woman kind of thought, oh yeah, I can do this, oh, it sounds cool. So can you tell us that part, how it brewed into this?
Yeah, so the initial idea came from my co-founder Anirudh. He was in MIT back then, and he's somebody who does these things really well, come with crazy ideas. And then once that idea was there, that okay, you can do this, then comes the harder part. And harder part is that how do you take that idea from which, as you said, sounds very fictional, but how do you convert that into a real product? And that journey is long. And our team is not just about the people who are inside. There are a lot of contractors, there are a lot of independent people who work with us. And I think even today, we keep developing new solutions. The whole journey is, it's like doing that 0 to 1 multiple times, because even if you know that now you can make something from emissions, it is not necessarily that you can make every ink from these things. And when you look around, all the black is not same. The black marker that, you may have a black permanent marker, you may have a black whiteboard marker, you may have a ball pen, you may have a ink pen, you might be wearing a t-shirt that is dyed in black color, and there might be a t-shirt that is printed with black color. All these blacks are different. They're not same, they're not formulated in the same way. And the journey to do that is like reinventing everything from, to start every time. Then we do that every year. Even right now, we are running pilots where we are going back to the core pigment itself, that whether a particular type of emission will work for this solution or not. So that is a journey that we have been going through. The initial idea, as I said, came from Anirudh, and since then, a lot of our team members and third-party consultants have worked to develop these solutions. And but the most important, I think, how we have built this is we never build this as a product, in the sense, normally how you develop a solution and you take it to the market. What we have done is we had an idea and we took that idea to the market, and the product was developed always in collaboration with the brands that we have worked with. So we never defined at what type of product we want to make. The brands worked with us to develop the right product. And what it led to is that you always had a product that is being developed where already there is a user to put it to the market. And that allowed us a lot of feedback that is generally not very easy to get. It takes time to develop these type of products and take it to the market, while we were always building for the market with our customers. And that journey, I think, gave us a lot of ways to cut out wasting time as well as money. And I think that's the process we still follow for anything that we do.
Totally 100% correct, Nikhil. Why? Because sometimes what happens is you are working on a product, or let's say like any solution, but what matters is what the industry needs, because at the end of the day, the industry is the one who is going to take forward for commercialization. So it's very much needed and very much important that you address those problems so that it can be scaled up in a better way, and it works on like both like win-win situation for you and as well as the end consumer who is taking it. Yeah, these inks which are produced from this carbon black, which is like sequestered, so how different is it from the ink which is produced conventionally? Let's say like in terms of carbon footprint, or let's say like in terms of the efficiency, maybe in painting, or like how well we can use it, or like what are the emissions coming out of it?
In terms of product performance, so there are two aspects to it. There are three aspects we should talk about. And I think one aspect which normally people who are not part of the industry don't see it, but we'll talk about that too. So there are three aspects to it. One is the carbon footprint. Second is the performance, and third is the safety. So these are the three things that we have to deal with. Now, when it comes to carbon footprint, it's simple. 1 kg of carbon black has about 2.4 kg of CO2 footprint. So there is a linear model. If I replace 100 grams of carbon black, I'm saving about 240 grams of CO2 in that product. Now, what happens is different formulations have different carbon loading to it. Some are very thick inks. Some are very if you see the paint you use for Brazilian is very thick, whereas the ink pen that you have or the ink pen that you may have is a very smooth flowing, very liquidish, very less density inks. So the less dense the ink is, less is the carbon loading in it. So the footprint varies on different product to product. But in terms of replacement, it's simple. The amount of carbon black you would replace, the footprint saving is about 2.4, as an X factor, with a 2.4. So for every 1 gram of carbon black, 2.4 grams of CO2 will get replaced. So that's how the carbon footprint side is. In terms of performance, and just like any other ink, it is not supposed, at least right now, we are not targeting any outperformance. We are just targeting that we match the performance. And I think that's our first level goals are that any customer who wants to use these inks doesn't have to do anything different to be able to, shift from a conventional ink to this ink. So there is no change in process in terms of they don't have to change anything on their printing process or assembly line. ink, especially when you're printing on fabric, there is something called curing, that you have to dry out the ink on the fabric so that, and then make sure it fixes really well with the fabric so that it doesn't leak when you are washing it, and or it is getting exposed to moisture. Those are the things we don't want the customer to say, okay, I need to do a lot of work to use these inks. So that is performance wise, our goal is simple, that these inks perform just like any other ink. Now, the third aspect is safety, which is, I believe, the most important one, because at the end of the day, the source is emissions. So this is where our effort and focus is, that I make sure that the product that I'm putting to a customer, it satisfies the industrial requirements, and whatever the regulatory requirements for that industry is. And that varies from product to product. If you are using a product that is touching your skin versus something that is not touching your skin, the regulatory requirements are different. So these are the things that our focus is generally on, to make sure that a product that is going out in the market satisfies these three things: that there is a carbon footprint saving, there is performance standards are same as any other ink, plus that the safety standards, we are meeting whatever our clients' requirements are. So these three things we focus on. At the end of the day, as I said, the core thing is carbon footprint saving, and that's what is the fundamental to what we are building. Otherwise, there is no point of doing it.
Explained and like straight to the point, I can say. So that's one point of understanding it, like apart from carbon, like how we are how you guys are addressing this problem. So like what is the way forward, like how you guys want to span this, in the sense, what I mean is, like, do you want to also consider, like earlier you explained about particle matter, like 2.5, right? So
Yeah.
are you scoping it in such a way that you will expand from, apart from carbon, to other particulate matter, like greater than 2.5 or less than 2.5? So is there any vision for that as of now from Graviky Labs?
So when it comes to particulate emissions, they always come in varied size. So PM 2.5, PM 10 are the two, broad categories people talk about. Whatever emissions we get come in variety of forms and variety of color. So that is part of the same portfolio. I wouldn't say that we are looking beyond that. But yeah, we keep doing a lot of other research. For example, I said this is PM 2.5, this is particulate matter capture. But we have done a lot of research on CO2 as to how do you, there is a lot of work happening on what you call carbon capture and storage. So we are doing that. But again, this is very early day. So we haven't put it out much in the public. And I think it will remain like that for some time. But there are explorations happening. There are things that we are looking for. We're not sure, when they go in public, but hopefully soon.
Best wishes to all the planning part of your ideas. So that also, seeing is from Graviky Labs, what is the vision for, if I have to ask for like next coming 5 years or 10 years? So what would be your vision or the mission of Graviky Labs?
Well, our goal is simple. We are building products that people need and that are more sustainable. That is simple. This in itself is the vision, which is whether it's a 5-year, 10-year, or 1 year. This doesn't change. All of us have had, any hardware startup has had some good troubling last 3 years. So we are making sure that we foolproof that. So we are changing our ways of doing things, how we scale, where do we do the work. So those are the things that we are adjusting. But the goal and vision is very clear, that there is a lot of replacement of conventional petrochem that you can do. You don't have to necessarily keep, building these, remain dependent on fossil fuels for everything. There are a lot of things that you can easily replace. Getting EVs network has been a difficult one because it requires so many changes. But making this ink is not that difficult. And that change doesn't require a fundamental, a state level or a country level changes. You can do you can take that ink and print on your own, start using it for your artworks. Those are the small changes which can accumulate to make a larger impact. And that is how we see doing things. Even for CO2, we started off, I think, a couple of years back, and we modified our vision to say, okay, whatever CO2 work we will do, we'll do it in an open source. We're not going to keep the IP with us. We're going to open source everything. And that is what right now, my co-founder has been focusing on. He's building that part, that we're going to build those solutions and put it to the world. And let anybody who wants to do that should be able to do it. Because one of the key things that we believe is that is a part of the core vision, is that you cannot fight climate change by doing the things exactly the same way, which led to this problem. So you cannot be doing 250 years of industrial revolution in the same way. You have to do things a bit differently. And some of that would involve that you do not focus on just building things for the large, enterprises. It requires that you build things that can be deployed even at the smallest possible unit. The solution doesn't have to go up, that only if it will make sense, only if, some very large enterprise takes it up. So that is how our core vision is, that you keep doing these small solutions that keep accumulating to a larger one. And along with that, on the CO2 side, build solutions that are open source, give it to the people, let them figure out what they want to do with it. Don't straitjacket, follow the IP regimes that have led to the current problem. And yeah, give more power to the people with whatever work, with whatever our means are, in terms of limited resources that we have as a team. But yeah, do it as a business. So I'm not doing any philanthropy. I will be very clear of that. I'm not doing any charity here. I'm building products that are profitable. And that is also one of the core principles that we follow, that you cannot build unsustainable solutions which are not sustainable as a business. They will not make sense. You cannot run them on, purely on investor money or grant money. You have to have a customer who's ready to pay for it and to pay at a price that is profitable for you. So those are the core things that we have built everything around. And we're going to just keep following and building over next number of years to just make sure that a lot many people use it than what we have done till date.
Can we take a moment, guys, to appreciate what you just said, Nikhil? Because one thing which I really personally appreciate is the fact that where you mentioned that climate change is not something that can be, tackled by one or two, or let's say like any one enterprise or organization. It is beyond that, it's beyond a company, it's beyond a organization level. It's like everyone's effort is very much needed. So if we want to address this problem, the main core solution is that, bring out the solution whatever you can from your level and the deployment level as well. So once we go it, making it as one common thing, that's where the every problem, gets started. Because the main important aspect of any sustainability is that you go local and you address things suitable for your local environment and your local requirements and needs. That is most important thing to address this, and I really appreciate you for saying this out. And also, yeah, it's not philanthropy, it's at the end of the day, it's business. You need profits. So you are selling the product in the market, and you expect certain profits from that. Because for us to survive, or in the sense like for any company to survive, we need the transactions to be going on, but at what cost and what impact are we bringing in is what matters. One good thing which I like from Graviky Labs, Kaushik. So one more thing, when you are into this journey, right, like it's more like where you are reinventing yourself dynamically and spontaneously to address the needs of the market. So can you please tell us, since you are from non chemistry background or like technical background, you are mostly from finance background, how was this part of journey for you? Like, let's say, like, was it difficult, and how well did you spend time with your co-founder to understand these technical aspects of it?
Well, it's difficult for sure, but it's difficult for everyone. I know there are a lot of people in chemistry background who face similar challenge when they are building the business. So the whole idea of having a team is that people bring their own skill sets and, do a lot of complementary work. So I think that's the core of, otherwise everybody can be a solopreneur. You don't need to build teams. But not many solopreneurs have gone that big. So team is part of the process. And I think the journey there are times when you feel like that you are out of the place. There you do have that feeling that that the people who are operating with, whether it's your suppliers, whether it's clients, that you feel sometimes that you're not fitting in because you don't come from those specific backgrounds that are sometimes necessary. You can't say, hey, I'm not a scientist, I don't understand, qualitative, I don't understand physics, I want to be a pilot tomorrow. That's not how it works. Certain things do require a core fundamental, the space you're working in. But I think when you are in the real, in the commercial settings, you do get to learn a lot. And I think for me, the most important part has been that the climate change is still very early in terms of as an industry. And the way it is developing, few years down the line, that won't be a question. Like, I believe everybody, and the way regulations are coming, as well as how businesses are picking up sustainability as a core part of their guiding principles, that everybody's job will become a sustainability job. So it doesn't matter whether you're an accountant, whether you are somebody who is doing travel arrangements, because
Yeah, true.
tomorrow you might get an instruction from the top that your travel arrangements all to have to be, measured in terms
Sustainable.
of sustainable.
Yeah.
So that is where I think things will change, and that's where you will stop feeling too much out of the place. But yeah, there were parts of this journey where I personally have felt that I do not belong here, and that happens quite often. So it's not that it happened years ago. It can
Yeah,
happen. It can
sorry
happen.
to interrupt, but
Mm.
so when you felt that way, how did you, cope up with that? Like for any person, it feels like not only with respect to like feeling out of
Yeah.
the place or like not fitting into the room, in
Right.
general, in your personal life as well. Like how would you see that, like pursue the situation and how would you react to such situation?
I think personally, for me, it's a very normal thing. It has happened for most of the things I've done in my life. So I've often gone into spaces which I was not built for. So I think that matters, but especially, but when you are with a team and you're doing things which are going out, which are being used by people, I think that gives you enough motivation to keep doing what you're doing. And also, I believe this sort of reality check of that when you feel that whenever you feel you're out of the place, it also is a good place to be in, because it gives you a reality check that, hey, there is a lot more to learn.
Yes,
So
yes.
there is, and I think when it comes to sustainability, you can argue in 100 different ways. You can always look at your solution and look at from a different perspective. And I think that is this sort of a feeling allows you to do that. If you're 100% sure your solution works, a lot of time in climate change, it doesn't. Uh, there are many things that we often don't account for. And once you start accounting for them, you realize that often your assumptions were wrong. So it's a good place to be in personally for me, that I often am not, I don't understand a lot of things. So I can go out and talk to people who understand that better, and gives you a different perspective of building things right.
Positive attitude towards any situation, I would say, and also looking forward, that gives so much of aspiration to learn as well. Now that you know that you don't know so many things, that gives you a way to learn those things. So
Absolutely.
that's, yeah, that's totally right, and it's very much needed for any entrepreneur to upskill his skills in any way possible.
Yeah.
So, Nikhil, talking about like how you spend your time on your business and other aspects as such, what is the one keynote, or like, what is the one takeaway you always keep with yourself to balance it out in a way, so that it doesn't, you are not, like completely like exhausted?
I don't. Personally, I am not somebody who balance things really well. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I think the balance is overrated. I know in climate change it isn't. So what you're building for, you do need balance. That's what we are complaining about, that the natural cycle has gone out of whack. So, really whack. So you need to bring some balance to it. So that part I agree. But personally, I think we don't have to, if you're doing something that you're interested in, you don't really need to balance things out.
Mm-hmm.
Post COVID, it was a challenge because you were stuck in places
Yeah.
where you don't need to be. But those were I think that was more difficult for my team members who were especially outgoing. Personally, I'm not that much. So, but yeah, I don't think balancing is what I'm really worried about. But yeah, it goes, I think it depends on every individual. So I wouldn't suggest that there is a particular way of doing things. I believe everybody has to find his own comfort zone, and not necessarily always feel that I have to be outside my comfort zone to do big things. You just have to be where you want to, where you feel you belong, and everything else is fine. So if you want to work 24 hours a day, it's great. And if you want to just work 6 hours a day, I know a lot of people who work way less than me but are far more efficient. So, so I don't mind if I can be that, but I'm not that efficient. So I do work a lot more, and not that particular about how do you balance things in a
I don't
personal
think
work.
so that you are inefficient in any way compared to the hours of work you're putting in. But yeah, that keeping aside, but also it depends on each and every person and how they have their priorities set, right? So,
Absolutely.
talking about Graviky Labs, Nikhil, do you have any, like, if you can define sustainability aspect, keeping aside Graviky Labs, you as
Yeah.
in person, Like, how can you define sustainability to someone who doesn't know anything about climate change? He doesn't have any idea, but he
Yeah.
wants to know sustainability. So how would you define in your own word?
See, I think the bigger problem with climate change is we have started using terms which are not very easy for an individual to grasp. This year, I was
Yes.
just talking to a friend today. Somebody will say, hey, the Bangalore is particularly warm. And then somebody says, oh, because it's a El Nino year. But so what happens is, yes, there will be El Ninos and La Ninas. There will be, the natural variations. The question is not about those variations. Question is, where is the trend? And that is what is not very visible to individuals. And therefore, if you go around Bangalore, for example, a city which had a lot of lakes which have completely disappeared, traffic which is completely, not what how you want it to be. And I'm not sure. I remember a lot of people who used to talk about 10 years back, hey, Bangalore, it will rain 7, 8 months a year. I don't see that happening anymore, right? So things have gone from where it used to be, but it has happened so slowly that a lot of people do not see it, do not feel that change that drastically. And that is where I believe the biggest challenge of getting a buy-in from people is very difficult when it comes to climate. How COVID, suddenly everybody was locked inside and more or less people complied, right? People took vaccines because they saw the threat was immediate. With climate change, that immediate, that emergency of threat is often missing because it is not that visible. So I think that is one of the biggest challenges of climate communication. For me, as I see it, is simple: that don't try to create a broad macro narrative. You have to customize the narrative to the people. So if you want to convince people, you want to convey to them what sustainability is or what climate change is, you have to deal with their geography, their personal experiences, and weave in your messages just with that. So if you want to talk to somebody who was living around a lake, you have to talk about that lake rather than talk about ice caps or polar ice or what is happening on South Pole. He won't relate to that. So it is very important that climate change messaging is very localized to a lot of communities. A lot of people outside cities do not have the same messaging going to them. And I'm sure if you even walk around the streets of Bangalore or any other city, maybe good 8 out of 10 people will not have any concern about the issue. Most of them may have heard about it, but they are not losing their sleep over that. That is the
Yes.
big concern. Now, how does that happen? I'm not a communication guy. But what we saw was, for example, this is what happened with airing. That when we made these markers, we never thought, what these airing markers will do. But whenever we give it to somebody's and say, okay, you can hold it. And the moment that marker was in their hand, they could say, okay, I understand what it is. Because you can convey to them that, hey, what you're seeing out of that, chimney or that exhaust or that car or a truck, this is what those emissions are. I think that is what creating those visual messages, visual cues for people to accept that and understand, yes, this is what we are talking about. I think that is what we did with airing. So we have to create solutions which are visible to people and in a way easier for them to understand. And a lot of solutions will get accepted, which will happen primarily via infrastructure changes, how it is happening with EV or solar, but a lot of other things, how our grandparents or even our parents used to use, cloth bags instead of plastic. Those are the things which we can, is very easy to do. And I think sustainability, if you ask me, is in the simplest terms is that it's a conscious living, how you can be conscious about what you're doing and how it is impacting people around you. Not many years ago in the West, there was no knowledge of trees being alive, that was proven by science research that hey, tree is alive, is feeling, it's thinking. But in Indian culture, for example, trees have been worshipped forever. So there are a lot of things that we have done in past which was always a lot more sustainable. We just have lost some of those things in name of convenience.
Mindfulness to say,
consciousness, right? To be conscious about why we were doing
certain things.
And be it recycling. We have been doing recycling, upcycling in our houses forever. The things that we joke about our parents now, that how they will take every piece of cloth and reuse it for I don't know how many years.
Mopping, sweeping, everything is done by that waste cloth.
So those are the things which are very easy to communicate and not very hard to even adopt. But I don't see any reason why I have to convey pure technical terms and dumb that down for people. I don't think that is necessary. Talking about their habits and just playing around that place where you can convey how, how they dispose of their clothes, how they dispose of it, their, packaging, paper, what sort of vehicles they use. Those are easier things to deal with rather than telling somebody that this is 10% saving a carbon footprint. I personally don't like that. And I personally don't like reducing carbon footprint to an individual's conversation, because a lot of things that you can just simply, if a country believes that plastic is bad, ban it. People won't have access to it. Their carbon footprint is reduced in one go. Instead of chasing people and say you change this and that at a on macro changes, you let those changes come from government and let people become more conscious about their day-to-day habits. I think a combination of the two should get you where you want to be.
The way you explained was really nice, and also, the connection is very much needed. And I would like to highlight one more point which you were mentioning. The more the people relate, the more they understand, and the more they are concerned about the issue. The more we say it in a very difficult terms, like I feel like that's where the gap is only because of that factor, I would also say. And yeah, as you were saying, right, like if we talk to 10 persons on the road, like nobody would be ready to, lose their sleep on this issue. The very main thing would they say is like, okay, we read that like environmental pollution is happening. We read that like there will be no water in 10 years, 20 years. We read that like the oxygen is going to be, eliminated, or like the amount of other toxic gases is increasing. But where is it happening? They can't really see that immediate trigger warning. The way and the pace how it is happening is very slow and subtle, that people who are not really conscious of it can easily just ignore it. So that's one part I would also like to highlight to everyone, that the more conscious you are or mindful you are about what you are using and what you are consuming, that itself is a sustainable way of living. You don't have to go live in Himalayas. I am telling you that whatever the choices you make, be mindful, be conscious of it. Thank you so much, Nikhil. So this was one good conversation we had. And also, if I have to say, from your experiences and from your journey with the Graviky Labs, if I ask you to give three words or three messages to the listener, what would that be? It doesn't have to be, from your entrepreneur journey. It's like more of your personal aspect of.
I think I'm not sure. First thing is that you don't have to be an entrepreneur to. That is one very important message to understand, that we often try to, create a cult around entrepreneurs who are doing something different. You can do within the jobs that you are doing, within the household that you have. You can do a lot within the communities that you have. To be honest, a lot of work can be done at a community level. The second thing is that be assured that if we continue down this path, sustainability will become a core aspect of your professional life. So if you are a student now, or you are just starting your career, don't see it as a separate career choice. See it as part of what you're already doing. And there are a lot of courses available online. There's a lot of content available online that you can consume and become better in what you're doing from sustainability perspective. So I don't see, and I wish that happens, that there are no sustainability jobs. All jobs become sustainable jobs. And that is where it is. If you want to take a lead, try to have that knowledge with you now, rather than waiting for somebody in your offices to tell you that you need to do this. Take lead, take initiatives, see what you can do and contribute. And I think that will make whatever you will do, it will help you personally, but it will also help at the fight against climate change at large. And I think that is what is going to be very important. And it doesn't matter where you are, which part of the world you are, you will get affected. Today or tomorrow, the climate change will become much more visible. Before it happens, see what you can do for it.
So yeah, we have one more.
I think two is good. I don't have I'm out of ideas. I'm not that good with that. I'm good with all these. This is what I know. Yeah.
Okay, that's okay. Let's not pressurize Nikhil. So the summary was that, first point was everyone doesn't has to be an entrepreneur. So it can be as small as, switching off your lights, like being mindful of the amount of electricity you use, the amount of water you use, and the kind of consumption you make, the kind of products you take in is all mostly about sustainability and how well you can reduce it. So instead of going or like also you can how well you can recycle is also one of the other part attached to it. And the second part was, as he was rightly saying, that instead of waiting for the market or the industry to come and say you that, hey boss, now you're required to do so and we need so and so resources, so can you do that? Instead of that situation, what best you can do is like you can cope up with the things which are already happening, start consuming content. And if you really are a student, please start looking at these issues and see how can you can inculcate all these learnings in whatever profession you are doing, because going forward it has to be addressed in each and every profession is what I feel. Thank you so much for this conversation, understanding how the Graviky Lab started, and also a little bit part of because of the fact that it started from Indranagar in Bangalore and I also from Bangalore. So that also added more to it. So thank you so much for the conversation, and we are at the end of the episode. Thank you, listeners, for listening to it. So, if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a comment on the poll. I would love to read them. You can find me on Instagram at getsetgreen.in. You can DM if you have any suggestions as such. The three R's of sustainable living are reuse, recycle, and most importantly, reduce. Stay tuned until next episode. Bye. Take care.